As always, I'd like to thank the brethren in the congregation for their faith in me to allow me to get up here and share what I have studied on God's Word. And I pray that it will be edifying and beneficial to you, each and every one of you. Today, we seem to have many social problems here in America. Everything from hate crimes to rape, murder, domestic abuse, theft, abortion, and even things as small as people being rude to you at the grocery store. And they all spring out from a heart of self-centeredness. The world doesn't seem to care about others, only themselves. And so all of these problems stem from one problem. The world doesn't know how to love or how to show it. Love is something that is seriously misunderstood in our culture. It's something taken for granted every day, but it's also something that can break through to people's world-hardened hearts and show people the truth and allow for the spreading of the gospel. And it can also help promote others in the church and in our church family to love and to good works. But first of all, love is the center of our relationship with God. Mark 12 and 28 and 31 says, "And one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, asked him, 'Which commandment is the most important of them all?' Jesus answered, 'The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandments greater than these.'" Jesus here has two commandments which really go hand in hand. And 1 John 4 and 20 explains why they go hand in hand. It reads, "If anyone says, 'I love God,' and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen." There you go. You ever wondered why Jesus paired these two commandments together and didn't just say, "The Lord your God is one and you shall love him with your whole heart"? It's because every human being is made in the image and the glory of God, Genesis 1 and 27 and James 3 and verse 9. And if we can't love our brethren who are made in the image and glory of God, how can we love God? But as I stated before, the world doesn't really understand love. At least not the Christ-like kind of love, the service of which it entails, and the self-sacrifice of which true love demands. 1 John 3 and 16 says, "By this we know love, that Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers." Christ is our example of love, and we need to learn from it. If you want a verse that talks about what are many of the attributes of love, look no further than 1 Corinthians 13 and 3 through 8, where Paul says, And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing." And then he goes on to list what true love should look like when he says, Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Here, Paul makes it clear that not only is love required of us, but love is more than just an action, an outward action. And it's more than just a feeling. And there are some things that true love, a Christ-like love, will change in our lives. And at the end of verse 8, I find it interesting how Paul talks about prophecies, speaking in tongues, knowledge, they will cease. But love is what God decides to leave us with. God thinks love is very important, as he prized it all above all miraculous abilities. Paul shows that love has a lot of things it doesn't have a part in. And it's because love, when it is mature, will lack all selfish ambition and all self-seeking and seek only the benefit of others, just as Jesus showed his love by him dying on the cross, providing himself no gain. Complete selflessness, that is what we need to strive for. Being a servant requires humbleness, which is going to mean sacrificing ourselves and our pride and raising our fellow Christians up who may not be as mature in the faith. And it requires even more It requires it even more so of those who desire to be shepherds and leaders of the flock. Romans 15:1-3 says, "We who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let each one of us please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me." Jesus showed us the meaning of love when, even though he was to be offended because he knew one of his disciples was going to betray him, he washed his feet. In John 13:3-17, it reads, "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, do you wash my feet?' Jesus answered, 'What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand.' Peter said to him, 'You shall never wash my feet.' Jesus answered him, 'If I do not wash you, you have no share with me.' Simon Peter said to him, 'Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.' Jesus said to him, 'The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you.' For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, 'Not all of you are clean.' When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, 'Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them.'" No man is greater than the other in the church. This is what Jesus did. Rather than just saying the disciples needed to humble themselves and hold higher than themselves their fellow man, he showed them and led by example. Rather than in word, by not just barking out orders and saying, "Do it," he got down on his knees and got his hands dirty. The job of foot washer in those days wouldn't have been the most respected of jobs to have. It was usually done by a slave, according to Barclay, so it was a job people didn't normally volunteer for. It was thrust on them. You would have had to basically kneel before everyone at your master's motion to wash his guests' feet. And feet, as we all know, are not the prettiest of things to be washing or the best smelling. Add in some dirt from the open sandals they wore and a little manure from time to time, and foot washer is not the most pleasant position to hold in a household. But it was a position that Jesus, our head and our king, was not ashamed to hold, and he willingly did it. He was not ashamed to kneel before every one of his disciples and friends in order to show them that what they lacked to be leaders and Christians was that Jesus wanted and needed from them. That was true love. And even though one of these men, one of his friends, was to be responsible for his death, still he washed the feet of Judas, his betrayer. Jesus was and is the perfect example of a leader. We are to follow his example. 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul said, "Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ." Seeming as we are Christians, which means to be Christ-like, we need to follow Christ's example. Luke 22:26 says, "But not so with you. Rather let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves." Matthew 20:26-27 says, "It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant." Leaders are to be servants, not front men who stand up here above everybody else and show off and pretend that they're better than everyone else, because no one is greater than his master. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. Those who are full of pride and not willing to humble themselves will end up bringing their own destruction." Mark 10:42-45 says, "And Jesus called them to him and said to them, You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Those who think highly of themselves, too highly of themselves to humble themselves, need to remember that the Prince of Glory came not to serve, but to be came not to be served, but to serve. He came to be humiliated by having men blindfold him and hit him and say, "Prophesy to us. Who hit you?" The Jews ridiculed him, saying, "He saved others, yet he cannot save himself." In Mark 15:31-32. He could have called 12 legions of angels down to rescue him, but instead, the Prince of Glory, the King of Israel, chose to suffer as a man who doesn't even have the right to decide how he shall die. James 4 and verse 10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you." Luke 14:11, "For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." The day is coming when we will all be humbled, but we will be glorified by God, because we enjoy the graceful gift that our God has offered and we have accepted. Today, you have a chance to humble yourself and accept God's graceful gift that he has given to you before it's too late. If you have not humbled yourself and accepted God's gracious gift, then you know your time is running out, and every second that goes by is one less than you have to do so. You must come believing, John 8:24. You must come repenting, Luke 13:3, confessing, Matthew 10:32, and be baptized for the remission of your sins, Acts 2:38. Or if you've forgotten your place in this world and you've forsook Christ in a public manner and need to make a public confession, please do so. Or if you'd like to receive the prayers of the church, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.